Hey guys, welcome back to another video from Inside. This is another episode of the series in which Ash finally goes on evolving his Pokemon in his journey. Well, this journey is on what will happen if Ash stayed at his home after the Unova League and think and realize that he need to upgrade and he has to evolve his Pokemon for some real and good matches. So after that, he goes on retaking Kanto gyms. So let's see what will happen in this journey. Will he meet his old friends, new friends, or his old enemies? So let's begin this video. And if you haven't subscribed the channel yet, please do that and help me complete 10k subscribers. So let's begin today's video without any more delay.
Inside a cave not too far the location of where our heroes are elite officer for Team Rocket Domino along with agents Cassidy and Butch opens up a laptop which begins a communication with Giovanni. Domino begins the communication. Sir, we are at least 1 mile away from Cerulean City. Excellent, your mission is to infiltrate Cerulean City and take a fossil revival machine from the research facility. Giovanni explains the team's mission to her. The machine is important to my research, Dr. Namba says, who appears in a transmission next to Giovanni. Dr. Samba, Cassidy says while failing to remember his name. It's Namba, you bimbo. The Team Rocket scientist yells angrily. These machines are used to revive fossilized Pokémon. Giovanni explains to his agents while the computer shows them pictures of Omanite, Kabuto, Cranidos and Shieldon. Domino will be in charge of the mission since she is the highest-ranking officer. Giovanni explains to the three who respond with, "Sir." And Namba's communication ends as does his. Meanwhile, our heroes are about to enter Cerulean City, site of Ash's second Kanto region gym battle. It's been so long since I've been here. Suddenly something goes on top of Ash's head and he looks up to see it is a Yanma. Hey, a Yanma, Ash says after seeing the clear wing Pokémon. May then pulls out her Pokédex to see Yanma's data. Yanma, the clear wing Pokémon. If it flaps its wings really fast, it can generate shock waves that will shatter windows in the area. Yan, the clear wing Pokémon says and then moves to Max's head. Hey, I could use this in my gym battle against Misty, Ash says excitedly and looks at Pikachu. Pikachu, use Thunder Wave, Ash tells Pikachu, who then replies with, Pika. Pikachu then takes aim at the clear wing Pokémon who has jumped off Max's head and unleashes a charge of electricity on it which then paralyzes it. Ash then pulls out a net ball and says, go net ball. He then throws it on the clear wing Pokémon which absorbs it quickly and begins to wobble and blink several times and halts, confirming the capture. It then teleports away to Professor Oak's lab. Ash, what's a net ball? May asks. It's a poke ball that works really well on water and bug-type Pokémon, Ash replies. Suddenly Ash's Pokegear rings and answers it, who is none other than Professor Oak. Professor Oak, what is it? Ash asks. It's important you remember Pokémon Hunter J, correct? Ash shuddered at the Pokémon professor's words and remembers the feared Pokémon Hunter who he encountered multiple times in the Sinnoh region about 3 years ago. Her work disgusted Ash, the way she treated Pokémon. I hoped after her ship crashed into Lake Verity and blew up he hoped to see the last of her, but perhaps not. Yami and Dawn remember her. Ash relies with great contempt. Ash, who's Hunter J? May asks with curiosity, and within a flash Ash pulls out his laptop and looks up a wanted poster of her and turns it to May and Max. J is a Pokémon hunter. Me, Dawn and Brock ran into her a few times in Sinnoh. She captures Pokémon that she was hired to capture, and if she finds one she thinks is worth something she captures it. That sounds awful, May says with disgust. May, Max, is that you? Professor Oak asks. Oh, of course, Professor, May replies, for the two of them. Well, it's good to see both of you. He then returns to the reason he called Ash. Anyway, the reason I called is because there have been recent sightings of her here in Kanto. Ash then responds with shock face and asks, where was she sighted? She was sighted near Cinnabar Island and just off the coast of Vermilion City, but nowhere near Pallet Town. If you're afraid she'll try and steal the Pokémon here, Professor Oak assures Ash on his worries. Thanks Professor, I'll call you back when I get to the center. He then ends his call with the Pokémon Professor. I can't believe she's back. How did she survive that? Dawn says, and Max asks, survive what? The last time she was seen she was hired by Team Galactic to steal the 3 Lake Guardians Mesprit, Azulf and Uxie. Ash begins to explain. Ash continues to explain, but Team Galactic double-crossed her and sent her ship crashing down into Lake Verity. Everyone including me thought she was killed, but somehow she survived. Now she's in Kanto probably looking for Pokémon to steal, May says after hearing Ash's story. Yeah, but for now let's focus on the gym battle, Max says, trying to get everyone back on topic. Oh yeah, of course, Ash says with an embarrassed face. The 4 then run down the road to Cerulean City, and Pikachu smells a rather sweet-smelling aroma and tugs on Ash's shoulder going, Pika Pie. Ash then says, what is it, Pikachu? Pikachu then points to a tree that is covered in honey. Hey, it's a honey tree. Ash then notices several Combi flying around the trees. Hey, we must be near a place where Combi live, Dawn says, seeing several Combi in the area, and May pulls out her Pokédex as she has not seen a Pokémon like this yet. Combi, the tiny bee Pokémon. A Pokémon formed by 3 others. It busily carries sweet floral honey to Vespiquen. And Vespiquen is? May asks and looks up Vespiquen in the Pokédex. Vespiquen, the beehive Pokémon and the evolved form of Combi. When endangered, grubs from its 6-cell honeycomb strike back. There is only one in a colony. Whoa, this Pokémon sounds interesting, May says. Yeah, but only female Combi can evolve into Vespiquen. I know a way to find one, Ash says, intending to capture a female Combi, and pulls out a Pokeball. Eevee, I choose you. He then throws the Pokeball in the air and the evolutionary Pokémon is unleashed. Use attract on all the Combi, he says. Soon after, Eevee winks and unleashes multiple hearts at the tiny bee Pokémon, and many become infatuated by the effect. There's got to be one somewhere, Ash says to himself, and notices one that was not affected by the attract. There's a female, Ash says, and points at the female Combi, who starts to fly away. Pikachu, use Thunderbolt, Ash tells the mouse Pokémon, who soon unleashes an electric shock on Combi, who then falls to the ground fainted, and Ash pulls out an empty Pokeball. Now go Pokeball, he says, and then throws the Pokeball at the tiny bee Pokémon, which absorbs it, then wobbles and blinks several times and halts, confirming its capture, and teleports away to Professor Oak's lab. Now with some training I'll have a Vespiquen, Ash says, and turns away to see the many angry Combi in front of him and his friends, and Max looks confident, pulls out a Pokeball and throws it in the air. Dusknoir, confusion, he says, and in a flash the Gripper Pokémon is unleashed and murmurs, Dusknoir, and unleashes a ray that sends the tiny bee Pokémon into confusion. Quick, the confusion will wear off, Max says to the others as they run away from the tiny bee Pokémon. Ash and friends then enter the city and find a table with an umbrella protecting them from the shade. That was close, thanks Max, Ash says to his Hoenn companion. Thank Dusknoir, she used Confuse Ray. May then pulls out her Pokédex in curiosity of her brother's new Pokémon. Dusknoir, the Gripper Pokémon and the evolved form of Dusclops. This feared Pokémon is said to travel to worlds unknown. Some even believe that it takes lost spirits along with it. I can see Dusclops evolved, Max, May says to her younger brother, and Ash sits up after catching his breath after running from the angry Combi. Okay, first let's go to the research facility, the zealous Pokémon trainer says, eager to revive and capture a Kabuto, and the 4 begin to travel through the city, and after at least 15 minutes they finally arrive at the research facility. So who is the person you guys came here to see? Ash asks the siblings, and May smiles and replies, You'll see. They enter the facility to see May and Max's parents. Norman and Caroline are there with a Chansey, and they turn around to see their children. May, Max, you're just in time, Caroline says, glad to see her children, and Norman turns to Ash. Ash, it's good to see you again, and you must be Dawn, he says, noticing Dawn next to Ash. You're Norman, the Petalburg gym leader and May and Max's dad, right? Dawn asks. Yes, of course. He answers, and the Chansey with them says, Chansey. Ash then notices it and pulls out his Pokédex in curiosity. Chansey, the egg Pokémon and the evolved form of Happiny. A kindly Pokémon that lays highly nutritious eggs and shares them with injured Pokémon or people. Ash then asks, Norman, whose Chansey is this? It's my Chansey, Ash. Norman replies, I caught it while it was a Happiny. Norman tells Ash about the egg Pokémon. Norman flashes back to him and Caroline in the greenhouse watering the plants, and suddenly May's Delcatty, who weeks prior evolved from contact with a moonstone, runs out of the bushes and brushes up against Caroline's legs and meows, Del Del, and Caroline, realizing something's wrong, says, Delcatty, what's wrong? Delcatty then motions them to follow her, which they acknowledge. They then follow Delcatty and find a Happiny unsuccessfully attempting to pluck berries from the trees, but can't due to her small stature. But suddenly she hears a crack of the branch, and Norman hands her an Oron berry and looks up to a smiling Norman and gratefully takes the Oron berry and eats it. Soon after, I captured Happiny, and since it had an oval stone in its pouch already, it just took a little training for it to evolve into Chansey. Another flashback shows Chansey using attacks such as Attract, Pound and Focus Punch on a challenger's Tauros, Drapion and Graveler. After its evolution, I started using Chansey in gym battles next to slacking Chansey as one of my most powerful Pokémon. Another shows Chansey being defeated by a Magmortar belonging to none other than Norman's son Max. But like all Pokémon, it doesn't always win a battle, but it's powerful and kind none of the less. He finishes his story of how he caught Chansey. So anyway, we're here to visit someone, Norman explains to Ash. You see, he is our. But before Norman could finish, a door opens and the 8 turn to it to see a man in his early 20s come in, surprised, and says, Mom, Dad, Max, May. Caroline runs in and hugs the man greatly, saying, Oh Derek, my baby. Hey May, who is that anyway? Ash asks the coordinator from Hoenn. He's my brother, she says with a smile. After getting finally Caroline off of him, Derek approaches Ash. So you must be Ash, Max has told me about you. Ash then shakes hands with Derek. May, why haven't you ever tell me about Derek? Ash asks the Hoenn coordinator. I just never got to telling you about him. May replies after Ash asked about her older brother. So Derek, what do you do here? Ash asks Derek. I'm a researcher here, Ash. I've been at this for at least 4 years. Oh good, 'cause I have this fossil that I need to revive, Ash says, and pulls out the dome fossil Seymour gave him in MT. Moon and Derek excitedly grabs it and examines it. A dome fossil, amazing. I know it's the fossil of a Kabuto, Ash says. Our machines can revive it, but will take 24 hours. I'll be alerted when it's done, Derek says, carrying the fossil to one of the revival machine. Where did you find that fossil anyway, Ash? May asks. MT. Moon, Seymour, scientists I met during my first journey gave it to me when me and Dawn were in there, Ash answers May's question. Soon afterwards, our heroes along with Norman and Caroline go to the local Pokémon Center. So you're re-challenging the Pokémon Leagues, Ash? Norman says after hearing Ash's reason for traveling through the Kanto region. Yeah, so when I'm in Hoenn you're the first one I'll go to, Ash replies, telling Norman the Petalburg gym will be his first challenge. Norman smiles and says, I like your attitude, Ash. Anyway, the reason we're here in Kanto is to see Derek. We haven't seen him in at least 3 years. Ash then turns to Max and asks, Hey Max, what was your position in the Hoenn League? Max then blinks several times and says, Well, I came in first place. What, really? Ash asks. Yeah, I did actually, but I nearly lost, Max says. He then flashes back to the final round of the Evergreen Conference and the announcer yells out, "Both trainers are down to their last Pokémon. Max with Sceptile and Barry with Empoleon begin." This trainer named Barry had an Empoleon with him who was pretty tough and he nearly beat us, but Sceptile's Overgrow kicked in and Sceptile was able to beat it with Solar Beam and Leaf Blade. So Barry was in the Hoenn region. One wonder where he is now. Dawn says, thinking where the energetic trainer could have gone after that defeat. "I have to call Professor Oak so I can get the Pokémon I need for my battle with Misty," Ash says, who gets up and goes over the video phone and dials the number, and Professor Oak answers it, who is examining Combee. "Ah, Ash, I see you're in Cerulean City," the Pokémon professor says. "Hey Professor, so what are you doing with Combee?" Ash asks after greeting Oak. "I was examining it. You can see that it's female from the dot on its forehead," the Pokémon professor says, pointing to the tiny bee Pokémons, who then says, "Calm. Anyway Professor, I brought my dome fossil here. May and Max's older brother Derek is reviving it in at the facility," Ash says. "Oh, I've actually heard of Derek from Professor Birch. He's a very intelligent one," Professor Oak says. "So Professor, I need some of my other Pokémon for my gym battle with Misty," Ash says. "Oh, of course," the Pokémon professor says. Dawn then notices a poster which is advertising a Pokémon contest in Saffron City. "There's a Pokémon contest in 2 weeks in Saffron City," Dawn reads the poster excitedly. Ash and the group enter the Cerulean Gym and everyone is admiring the beauty of the water-type gym, which is the location of his second Kanto League gym battle with his old traveling companion Misty. Misty's 3 older sisters perform water ballets here when there's no challengers, Ash explains to the rest of the group. The group passes an aquarium and several of Misty's Pokémon who recognizes Ash swim to him, which includes Starmie, Staryu, Goldeen and a Kingdra, which Ash recognizes as Misty's Horsey, who appears to have evolved in the past few years. "Whoa, Horsey evolved," Ash says with excitement. Dawn then pulls out her Pokédex in curiosity. Kingdra, the dragon Pokémon and the evolved form of Seadra. It sleeps deep on the ocean floor to build its energy. It is said to cause tornadoes as it wakes. Ash then deciding to make some last-minute changes in Pokémon and goes to the nearest phone to swap Pokémon. While he does that, the 5 walks into the battlefield, which is filled with people. "Whoa, what's going on?" Max asks, surprised that so many people are in Jim's battlefield. "I can explain that, Max." A voice came up. May and Max recognizes anywhere and turns around to see Scott, founder of the Battle Frontier, sitting in the seats of the battlefield. "Scott." The siblings say, shocked to see him. "Good to see you both. You see, some people in Cerulean like to watch the water ballets, some like to watch the gym battles, so people come here a lot more lately to watch the gym matches," the Battle Frontier founder explains. "Ash is the challenger today actually, Scott," Max says. "I guessed as much since you're here," Scott replies. "He's retrying the Pokémon League, Scott. So far he's beating Pewter Jim already," May adds, filling Scott in on what's happening with Ash. "Well then let's see how Ash has improved since the last time I saw him," Scott says, eager to see how Ash has improved in the last 3 years. Misty enters the battlefield as Ash does on the opposite side and the referee comes in. The gym battle between Misty, the gym leader, and Ash, the challenger, will now begin. It will be a full 6-on-6 battle and will be over when all 6 on either side are unable to battle, and furthermore only the challenger will be allowed to make substitution in Pokémon begin. The referee explains to the two. Misty then pulls out a Pokeball and says, "Melodic, I choose you." And in a flash the tender Pokémon comes out of its Pokeball with a "Mi." "Whoa, a Melodic," Dawn says, amazed at the beauty of the tender Pokémon. Ash then pulls out his own Pokeball and says, "Pidgeot, I choose you." And in a flash the bird Pokémon comes out in a flash yelling, "Pidgeot." Misty then looks in amazement to see the Pidgeot Ash released 5 years ago to protect the Pidgey and Pidgeotto in Viridian Forest from a Spearow flock on the opposite side of the battlefield. Dawn then pulls out her Pokédex. Pidgeot, the bird Pokémon and the evolved form of Pidgeotto. By flapping its wings with all its might, Pidgeot can make a gust of wind capable of bending tall trees. Melodic use Ice Beam. Misty commands the tender Pokémon after regaining focus, who obeys and unleashes a blue beam. Dodge it. Ash says to the bird Pokémon, who does just that. Now use Brave Bird. Ash says to Pidgeot, who then closes its wings and bursts into flames and dives at Melodic, and the flames change to a blue aura and strikes the tender Pokémon, creating a huge explosion. After the smoke clears, it shows Melodic has fainted and Pidgeot still stands but has done some major recoil damage, and the referee proclaims, Melodic is unable to battle the winner as Pidgeot. Misty then recalled Melodic back to its Pokeball. Misty then pulls out another Pokeball and yells, Starmie, it's your turn. And in a flash the mysterious Pokémon comes out and Dawn pulls out her Pokédex. Starmie, the mysterious Pokémon and the evolved form of Staryu. The center section of its body is called the core. It glows in a different color each time it is seen. Ash then says, Pidgeot, return. Deciding Pidgeot is worn out, recalls Pidgeot back to its Pokeball and pulls out another. He then throws it in the air and says, Torterra, I choose you. And in a flash the continent Pokémon comes out and lands on a pad big enough for it and yells, Torterra. The crowd cheers at the obvious power and strength of the continent Pokémon, and Misty then yells, use Bubble Beam. And Starmie then unleashes multiple bubbles upon Torterra, but before they could, Ash says, use Protect. And within a second of hearing the order, Torterra generates a green force field around itself which protects it from the Bubble Beam attack. Misty, a bit aggravated by Ash's tactics, says, use Swift. Starmie then unleashes several stars at Torterra, but Ash, thinking quickly, says, Torterra, use Solar Beam. After hearing the order, Torterra begins to absorb light from the sun as the swift attacks grow closer and unleashes a yellow and white beam upon the swift attack, destroying them and colliding with Starmie, throwing it across the battlefield, causing it to crash into the water. Fainted. Starmie is unable to battle the winner as Torterra. The referee announces. Misty then recalls Starmie, surprised she only had 4 Pokémon left while Ash still had all 6 in decent condition. She then pulls out another Pokeball and smiles, knowing this one will be hard to beat, and yells, Gyarados, I choose you. In a flash the atrocious Pokémon comes out and roars loudly. Ash then recalls Torterra back to its Pokeball and pulls out another, throws it in the air and says, Elekid, I choose you. And in a flash the electric Pokémon comes out of the Pokeball with a L. Scott, who is observing, says, I see Ash's strategy is to use Pokémon that have type advantages over the type of Pokémon the gym leader uses. Clever, but that doesn't always work. Scott, let's see what Ash has planned. Norman adds to the Battle Frontier founder's statement. Use Flamethrower. Misty commands the atrocious Pokémon, who then unleashes a beam of flames, but Elekid jumps out of the way and Ash says, Elekid, use Electro Ball. Elekid obeys and generates a ball of electricity and unleashes it, but Misty then says, dodge it. Gyarados then dodges the attack on the order of his mistress. Elekid then runs up his body due to his speed, use Thunder Punch. Ash says to Elekid, who then generates a punch of electricity which collides with the atrocious Pokémon's face, which causes it to fall down, but while does not defeat it, causes him to become paralyzed. Ash's Elekid's ability must be static, Scott said, knowing that static is a common ability for Elekid. Gyarados, use Hydro Pump. Misty orders, but the paralyzed atrocious Pokémon cannot move due to the effects of static. Now use Discharge. Ash says to the electric Pokémon, who then becomes surrounded by electricity and unleashes it upon the atrocious Pokémon, which results in it being knocked out. Gyarados is unable to battle the winner as Elekid. The referee says, Misty must be getting tense. She only has 3 left and Ash still has all 6 of his Pokémon left, May says. Misty, looking extremely peeved, pulls out her 4th Pokeball hoping this one can defeat one of Ash's Pokémon. She then yells, "Blastoise, I choose you." And in a flash the shellfish Pokémon comes out and yells, "Blastoise." Whoa, a Blastoise. Ash says, seeing Misty has acquired a Blastoise in the years since she became gym leader, but still knowing Blastoise had a disadvantage against electric types, stood confident and says to Elekid, "Use Thunder Punch." Elekid's fist then generates electricity and prepares to punch Blastoise, but Misty then holds out her hand and says, "Protect." Blastoise then generates a blue force field around itself and Elekid then bounces back after his Thunder Punch collided with Protect. "Now use Hyper Beam." Misty commands the shellfish Pokémon, who obeys its mistress and unleashes a red beam which hits Elekid and throws it in the water. Fainted. Elekid is unable to battle the winner as Blastoise. The referee proclaims. Ash then recalls Elekid and says, "Thanks Elekid," and turns to Pikachu. "Pikachu, you're up," and he replies with a "Pika," and he jumps in on the battlefield. "This should be interesting," Misty says, eager to see if Pikachu has learned new attacks over the last 3 years. "Use Volt Tackle." Ash says to his starter Pokémon, who then runs toward Blastoise and is surrounded by an aura of pure electricity and hits Blastoise in the stomach, causing a great deal of damage to the shellfish Pokémon but doesn't defeat it, and Misty then says, "Use Ice Beam." Blastoise then shoots a blue beam of ice at the mouse Pokémon, who gets hit by the beam and thrown around the battlefield and finally into the water. Fainted and quickly runs back to Ash. Pikachu is unable to battle Blastoise as the winner. The referee proclaims, "Now when it comes to a number of remaining Pokémon, it's an even 50-50, and Ash soon pulls out a Pokeball which contains a Pokémon that will truly surprise Misty. "Ivysaur, I choose you." And in a flash the seed Pokémon is unleashed and yells, "Ivysaur." "What?" Misty says after seeing Ivysaur, recognizing it as Ash's Bulbasaur, who had decided never to evolve many years ago. "I see Ash's Bulbasaur evolved," Scott says, recognizing Bulbasaur from Ash's frontier battle with the Pyramid King Brandon, in which the seed Pokémon was able to defeat Brandon's Dusclops with a powerful Solar Beam attack. "Use Sleep Powder." Ash commands the seed Pokémon to do, and it obeys and unleashes a green powder, putting Blastoise to sleep and making it more vulnerable to attacks. "Now use Solar Beam while it's down," Ash says to Ivysaur, who soon begins to absorb sunlight and unleashes the attack on the shellfish Pokémon, causing it to faint. Blastoise is unable to battle Ivysaur as the winner. The referee proclaims, "Now Misty looks extremely angry after losing 4 of her Pokémon to Ash and pulls out one that might have a good chance against Ivysaur. "Kingdra, I choose you." Misty yells out and throws a Pokeball in the air, unleashing the dragon Pokémon, who yells out, "King." This could be tough for Ash. Even though Kingdra is still a water type, it's also a dragon type, Max says, knowing about type disadvantages. "Use Razor Leaf." Ash says to Ivysaur to do, who obeys and unleashes several razor-sharp leaves that come out of his bulb, which are flying right towards Kingdra, and Misty then smiles and says, "Dodge it and use Dragon Breath." Kingdra then dodges the razor leaf attack and unleashes a translucent beam upon Ivysaur, knocking him out in one shot. Ivysaur is unable to battle the winner as Kingdra. The referee proclaims. Scott, observing the battle closely, says, "Ash has improved since I last saw him. Let's just see if it's enough to beat that Kingdra." Scott, Max says. Ash then recalls Ivysaur back to his Pokeball and pulls out another and throws it in the air and yells, "Torterra, I choose you." And in a flash the continent Pokémon is unleashed and yells, "Torterra." Misty then holds out her hand, "Use Dragon Breath." Ash then does the same motion, "Use Hyper Beam." The 2 Pokémon obey their trainers and unleashes a translucent beam and a red beam, and both collide, causing a reaction that knocks both Pokémon out. Both Pokémon are unable to battle, the referee proclaims. Misty and Ash then recall their fainted Pokémon back to their Pokeballs, and Misty pulls out her last one hoping she could beat Ash's two remaining Pokémon. She then throws it in the air and yells, "Lantern, I choose you." And in a flash the light Pokémon is unleashed. May then pulls out her Pokédex. Lantern, the light Pokémon and the evolved form of Chinchou. The light it emits is so bright that it can illuminate the sea's surface from a depth of over 3 miles. Ash, knowing it would be a bad idea to send out Pidgeot, so he pulls out his last Pokeball, his last hope. He then throws it in the air and says, "Seismitoad, I choose you." And in a flash the vibration Pokémon is unleashed and says in a deep voice, "Seismitoad." Everyone in the crowd looks amazed and shocked at the sight of this unfamiliar Pokémon from the Unova region. "Whoa, what Pokémon is that?" Scott asks, shocked at the sight of the vibration Pokémon. "It's called a Seismitoad. Ash caught it while he was in the Unova region." Max says, "Now that you mention it, I've heard that place somewhere." Scott says, "It's far away from the other regions and the Pokémon there can only be seen there." May adds, remembering what Ash told them, "I don't care where this Pokémon is from. Lantern, use Thunder Full Blast." Misty yells in an extremely aggravated tone. Lantern then does as its mistress commands and unleashes a large amount of electricity onto Seismitoad, who just stands there and unaffected and blinks several times. "Wait, it's not working." Misty asks herself, surprised the attack didn't work, and Ash then says, "It didn't work because Seismitoad is a water and ground type. Now use Mud Shot." Ash says to the vibration Pokémon, who unleashes blobs of mud onto Lantern that does some damage due to it being part electric type. "Now use Drain Punch." On Ash's orders, the vibration Pokémon, whose fist glows green, and punches Lantern and drains its energy, and Misty watches in horror as her last Pokémon falls down into the water, fainted. Lantern is unable to battle the winner as Seismitoad. The victor is Ash from Pallet Town. The referee proclaims after Ash, who has now wiped out all of Misty's Pokémon. Misty then recalls Lantern, now looking sad after her defeat at the hands of her old friend Ash. Later that day, Misty presents Ash the Cascade badge with a visibly sad look and walks away, and May says, "Misty looks kinda sad." Then Scott says, "It's hard losing a match to an old friend." Ash then turns to Scott with a surprised face and says, "Scott, what are you doing here?" Scott then replies with, "Visiting my sister mostly. I come here sometimes to see if there are any trainers worthy for the battle frontier." Watching from building using binoculars, Cassidy and Butch spot Ash and the group and contact Giovanni. "Sir, he's here," Butch says, and Giovanni smiles, now knowing Ash's location. "Obtain the fossil reviver first, then deal with Ketchum." He orders them, and the three reply with, "Sir." And this ends their communication. With Team Rocket's plot to steal the fossil reviver thickens, our heroes will have to be ready for what they have up their sleeves. Stay tuned. Ash and the group left the Pokémon Center in the morning to go to the research facility to see if Ash's dome fossil has been revived into the extinct Pokémon Kabuto. "It's been about 24 hours, so I think your Kabuto is revived by now," Norman said, thinking of how long it has been since his eldest son put the fossil in the reviver. The group then enters the research facility and Derek welcomes them. "The fossil was just revived, come this way," Derek says, leading them the reviver chamber. Derek then presses a button which opens one of the revivers, and after some steam clears, a Kabuto crawls out. "Whoa, a Kabuto." Max says, amazed at the sight of the shellfish Pokémon. Dawn then pulls out her Pokédex. Kabuto, the shellfish Pokémon. This Pokémon lived in ancient times. On rare occasions, it has been discovered as a living fossil. "Whoa, that's awesome," Ash says. He then pulls out an empty Pokeball, which he then throws on top of the shellfish Pokémon, which then wobbles and blinks several times and then halts, and sparkles fly off, confirming its capture. Ash then picks it up and says, "Enjoy, I caught a Kabuto." Back at the Cerulean Gym, Misty sits on the edge of the gym's battlefield with her legs in the water, feeling a little crushed after her defeat against her old friend Ash, in which his Seismitoad defeated her Lantern with just a mud shot and drain punch attack. Azumarill. Misty's Azumarill, who had evolved from her Marill weeks ago, says, trying to cheer its trainer up. "I'm fine, Azumarill, it's nothing," Misty says, trying not to seem depressed. Ash then goes back out to Route 25 to train with his Pokémon, including newly obtained Kabuto, since his next gym battle is with the leader of the Saffron City Gym, Sabrina, whom he helped regain her sanity years ago. Ash then unleashes Kabuto from its Pokeball, and May also pulls out a Pokeball ready to help Ash's new Pokémon train. Snorlax take the stage. May says and throws a Pokeball, and in a flash the sleeping Pokémon comes out with and says, "Snur." Whoa, Munchlax evolved. Ash says, recognizing Snorlax as the Pokémon that was once May's Munchlax, whom she caught during their time in Hoenn. Use Focus Punch. May commands the sleeping Pokémon to do, whose fists soon glow white, and is about to hit Kabuto, but the shellfish Pokémon jumps out of the way just in time and Snorlax hits the ground instead. Kabuto use Mega Drain. Ash commands the shellfish Pokémon to do, who obeys and sinks its claws in the ground, and soon vines wraps around Snorlax and begins absorbing Snorlax's energy. So far it's looking like Kabuto is a pretty strong Pokémon, Norman says, observing the battle between Ash's newly obtained Kabuto and his daughter's Snorlax. Kabuto then finishes absorbing Snorlax's energy, and the sleeping Pokémon falls down to the ground fainted. Snorlax return. May says, recalling her fainted Pokémon to its Pokeball. Suddenly the group hears a scream from a distance. "That sounds like Derek," Max says, recognizing his brother's voice. Derek is then seen running at fast speeds over to the group. "The facility has been robbed," Derek says while panting after running so fast. "What?" Ash asks, shocked by what Derek says. Soon after catching his breath, Ash and the group ran to the research facility, which is covered with police tape and police officers everywhere, and an officer, Jenny, comes up to Derek. "Mr. Haruka, it seems that whoever stole the fossil reviver left no trace," she explains to Derek. "The fossil reviver?" Ash says, shocked. The Jenny then led them to the fossil reviver chamber to find one of the revivers gone. How could anyone move something that big without being seen? Dawn asks, shocked, and Piplup backs her up with a, "Piplup, that will be hard to figure out. They took out the security cams before they came in, so they must be professionals," Officer Jenny explains to the coordinator from Sinnoh. Derek then pulls out something from the wall, showing the officer of the law and the group a hidden camera. "I decided to keep a camera hidden just in case robbers get rid of the security cameras," Derek explains to surprised group. He then takes out the camera's memory card, inserts into his computer, and plays a video showing Cassidy, Butch, and Domino stealing the reviver using a Machamp to remove the fossil machine, and a Lunastone using Psychic to move it out the window. "It's Cassidy and Butch," Dawn says, recognizing the duo as the ones who tried to kidnap a Hippowdon back in the Sinnoh region. Ash then sees Domino and says, "It's her." Ash, recognizing from his journeys in the Johto region years ago, who tried to capture Mewtwo, but she most likely doesn't remember the incident after Mewtwo wiped her and Giovanni's memories so they wouldn't bother him again. The third one is Domino. She's an elite Team Rocket officer. I've encountered her before. Ash explains to the everyone. "We have to find them," Jenny says. "You have no idea how right you are, officer," Derek explains. "A Pokémon is in the process of being revived, and if it's revived it could do some major damage to the city," he explains. Meanwhile, Team Rocket drive a tanker truck through the city which is carrying the fossil reviver, which is hidden under a tarp. Cassidy then contacts HQ. "Cassidy to headquarters, we have the fossil reviver," she tells the agent over the phone. "We'll meet you at the rendezvous point." The agent says, "Cassidy out," she says, ending the communication. Suddenly they hear a noise coming from the machine and park in an alley. Then they remove the tarp and Butch goes to the computer. the machine saying a fossil inside is done. The Team Rocket agent says then the reviver opens and smoke is unleashed, and when it clears the three agents stand shocked to see the ancient flying and rock-type Pokémon Aerodactyl. It's an Aerodactyl, Cassidy says, seeing the fossil Pokémon who soon flies out of the machine. Sableye use mean look. Cassidy orders the Darkness Pokémon to do, but before it could, Aerodactyl uses Roar, which sends Sableye back into its Pokeball. That was unexpected, Domino says after seeing the fossil Pokémon escaping. Cassidy, Butch. The trio hears a voice and turn to see Ash and Pikachu, who are blocking their entrance. Not you again, Cassidy says, recognizing Ash as the trainer they encounter every once in a while. Ash then pulls out a Pokeball and throws it in the air and says, Swellow use air slash. Swellow obeys its trainer's command and puts its wings together and generates a blue energy ball and fires it at the rockets, which sends them flying across the alley. You little bastard, Domino says, who gets up and throws a Pokeball, unleashing a Manectric, who yells, Manectric. Ash then pulls out his Pokédex. Manectric, the discharge Pokémon and the evolved form of Electrike. It discharges electricity from its mane. It creates a thundercloud overhead to drop lightning bolts. Fire Fang. The peeved elite officer barks at the discharge Pokémon, whose mouth becomes surrounded by flames, and bites down on Swellow, causing it pain, and when Manectric releases Swellow it becomes paralyzed. Manectric's ability must be static, but Swellow's is. Ash thinks when suddenly Swellow's eyes and body glows red. What's happening? Butch says, it was a mistake paralyzing Swellow. Domino, because Swellow's ability is Guts. Ash says knowing Guts raises the power of attacks when the Pokémon has a status problem. Now Hyper Beam. Ash says to the Swallow Pokémon, who soon generates a powerful red beam which hits Manectric and sends it flying, hitting Domino, making the two hit a dumpster, knocking them both unconscious. Mighty Enna, show that twerp what you're made of. Butch says, who then throws a Pokeball which unleashes the Bite Pokémon, who roars upon being unleashed. Houndoom, rip him to pieces. Cassidy says with a vicious tone, who then throws a Pokeball which unleashes the Dark Pokémon, who yells, Houndoom. Upon being sent out. Gabite, I choose. But before Ash could finish, Max says, who is behind Ash, says, Beedrill, use Pin Missile. Gallade, use Close Combat. Soon the Poison Bee Pokémon stingers glow white and shoot several missiles at Mighty Enna, being super effective due to it being a dark type, and Gallade begins to attack Houndoom fiercely. That Gallade is it? Ash asks himself, then realizes that Max's Gallade is most likely the injured Ralts Max helped during their adventures in Hoenn some years ago, and Max had kept his promise of coming back for it when he was a trainer. After the two dark types are defeated by Max's strategy of type advantages, he asks, ready to surrender. Suddenly Butch and Cassidy hear the clicking of guns and turn to Jenny, pointing a police-issued gun at them with several officers behind her. I would if I were you, she says, holding her gun ready to shoot if the duo tries anything. Back in Cerulean City, Aerodactyl flies through the skies and unleashes a flamethrower attack onto a fruit stand, destroying it, which frightens the citizens around it. Misty looks out the door of the gym to see Aerodactyl using Hyper Beam from a distance and runs towards it, ready to fight the fossil Pokémon to prevent it from causing any more damage to her hometown. Aerodactyl continues to fly through the sky and suddenly is struck by a Thunderbolt and Magical Leaf attack, which are revealed to have came from Ash's Pikachu and Bayleaf, who are trying to stop the fossil Pokémon's rampage through Cerulean. The computer says Aerodactyl has a range of different attacks to use, so this could be tough, Derek explains to Ash. That's good to know because I'm gonna catch that Aerodactyl, Ash says with a determined look. That could tough, Ash. I hope you have a plan, Derek says to his sister's companion. Aerodactyl then uses a Hyper Beam attack on another fruit stand, destroying it seconds, then suddenly while it was recharging is hit by an Ice Beam attack, which is revealed to have come from a Golduck who belongs to Misty. Psyduck evolved. Ash says, shocked to see Psyduck had evolved in the last few years and appears to be void of its chronic headaches. He then pulls out his Pokédex. Golduck, the duck Pokémon and the evolved form of Psyduck. It appears by waterways at dusk. It may use telekinetic powers if its forehead glows mysteriously. Pikachu use Thunder Wave. Ash says to the mouse Pokémon, who unleashes a charge of electricity onto Aerodactyl, paralyzing it, making it unable to move. Bayleaf use Magical Leaf. Ash says to the leaf Pokémon, who unleashes multiple green leaves onto the paralyzed fossil Pokémon, who then falls to the ground fainted. Good job, Bayleaf. Ash says to Bayleaf, who responds with, Bay. Suddenly she begins to glow and everyone watches in awe, and Ash says, Bayleaf's evolving. Bayleaf begins to grow in size as her head leaf is replaced with two stamen-like antennas, and the leaves around its neck begin to shrink in size, and the glowing halts, revealing Bayleaf in her new form as a Meganium. Bayleaf's now Meganium. Ash then pulls out his Pokédex. Meganium, the herb Pokémon and the evolved form of Bayleaf. Its breath has the fantastic ability to revive dead plants and flowers. That's awesome. And now, Ash says, and then pulls out an empty Pokeball. Go Pokeball. He then throws it on the fainted Aerodactyl, which absorbs it and drops on the ground and wobbles and blinks several times and then halts, and sparkles fly off, confirming its capture, and then instantly teleports to Professor Oak's lab back in Pallet Town. Several hours later, Caroline and Norman prepare to board a boat back to the Hoenn region. Well, Ash, I've got to get back to Petalburg. There are probably a crowd of challengers by now. Norman says to Ash. Chansey. Chansey says, eager to return to Petalburg. Soon the three boards the boat and soon are on their way back to the Hoenn region, and Ash and others say their goodbyes to Misty and Derek. Now with a newly evolved Meganium on his side along with the ancient Pokémon Kabuto and Aerodactyl, Ash is sure to have a good chance with his next gym challenge against Sabrina. Stay tuned. 15. Meanwhile, back at Team Rocket headquarters, Giovanni sits at his desk waiting to hear back from Cassidy. Butch and Domino and his secretary enters the office. Sir, I regret to inform you that the agents Cassidy, Butch and Domino were arrested in Cerulean City. She explains, frightened of what Giovanni might say. He slams his fist down on the table in anger. This boy is becoming a problem. Have there been any sightings of him? He asks. No, sir, not since him and his companions left Cerulean. The secretary replies. Send Annie and Oakley to follow him and report on his movements. He tells his secretary, yes, sir. She says and leaves the room. After stopping Team Rocket from escaping with a fossil reviver from the Cerulean City research facility, Ash and friends are now en route to Saffron City, the site of both Ash's third gym battle rematch and Dawn's first Kanto Pokémon contest. Okay, the Pokegear says the fastest way to Saffron City is to go through Route 5 inches, Ash says, looking at his Pokegear for directions. So Ash, we never met Sabrina when we were in Saffron. What's she like exactly? Max asks, curious. When I first met, she was on brink of schizophrenia, but with the help of a haunter she got back to normal. Ash explains, remembering what happened several years ago. She gave me the Marsh badge after I helped get back to sanity, but this time I'll earn it after beating her in a battle. Ash says, determined to beat the psychic-type gym leader. Piplup. Piplup calls out, noticing something in the way, and the group turns to where he is pointing and look to see it is an Abra sitting on the ground sleeping. An Abra, Max says, and May pulls out his Pokédex. Abra, the Psy Pokémon. If it decides to teleport randomly, it evokes the illusion that it has created copies of itself. Whoa, I'm definitely catching this one. Dawn says, amazed at the Psy Pokémon's appearance. And I have just the Pokeball. She then pulls out a Pokeball that's blue and has yellow stripes in an X shape. Go Quick Ball. Dawn says, and throws the Pokeball on Abra, which absorbs it, which then wobbles and blinks several times and halts, confirming its capture, and sparks fly off. Yes. Dawn says. I've heard of Quick Balls. They can catch Pokemon who are pretty fast. Ash explains to the others. Abra, come on out. Dawn says and Abra is unleashed from its Pokeball. Now we can get to Saffron quicker. Abra used teleport. Dawn says to her new Pokemon whose body then glows multicolored and the group along with Abra are teleported away instantly. Soon they are teleported out but to find it is not Saffron City but a majestic forest. This isn't Saffron City, Ash says, who pulls out his Pokegear and checks his location and with a grim look says, "Oh my god, we're not even Kanto." "What?" the group asks. "Then where are we?" May asks Ash, who shows them the Pokegear showing a map of Unova. "We're in the Unova region." He yells, which echoes through the forest, causing several Pidove to fly away startled. At Professor Juniper's lab at least a mile away, she then hears Ash's echoing yell and says, "Ash." Recognizing the voice of the boy whose Pokemon he stored at his lab just 2 years ago. "But why did Abra send us here and not Saffron City?" Dawn asks. "Abra must be a young Pokemon, so its skill with teleport must not be so good," Max hypothesizes based on what has just occurred. "According to the Pokegear map, we're on Route 3. I can visit Sillin in Striaton City." Ash says after looking at the Pokegear's map setting, "Who's Sillin?" Max asks. "Sillin is one of the 3 leaders at the Striaton City gym. The others are his brothers Chili and Cress. They give the trio badge to anyone who can defeat them," Ash explains. Suddenly a Blitzel jumps out of the bushes and the group turns to the electrified Pokemon. It's a Blitzel, Ash says, and Max pulls out his Pokédex. Blitzel, the electrified Pokemon. When thunderclouds cover the sky, it will appear. It can catch lightning with its mane and store electricity. "I'm defiantly catching this one," Ash says and throws a Pokeball in the air, unleashing Gabite, who yells, "Gabite." Ash then motions his hand to Blitzel. Gabite used Draco Meteor. Ash says to the cave Pokemon, who obeys his trainer's command, charges up an orange sphere in his mouth which goes into the air and meteors land on Blitzel, knocking it out in seconds. Ash then pulls out an empty Pokeball, throws it and says, "Go Pokeball." The Pokeball then lands on Blitzel and absorbs the electrified Pokemon, and it blinks and wobbles several times and halts, confirming its capture, and sparks fly off it and then shrinks down, unable to be opened. "Wait, why didn't it teleport to Professor Oak's lab?" Ash. Max asks. "Unova is too far away to make a connection, but I do know one place I can send it," Ash says, and then puts the Pokeball containing his newly captured Blitzel into his backpack, and the group continues to walk to Striaton City. Ash and the group are about to enter Striaton City when an Audino walks by looking happy and says, "Audino." Ash then turns to the hearing Pokemon and says, "Hey, an Audino." May pulls out her Pokédex, curious about this Pokemon. Audino, the hearing Pokemon. It touches others with the feelers on its ears, using the sound of their heartbeats to tell how they are feeling. "I'm defiantly catching this one Pikachu Thunder Wave," Ash says to Pikachu, who sends off electricity which causes sparks to appear around Audino, leaving it paralyzed, and then throws a Pokeball on it which absorbs it and wobbles and blinks several times and halts it, confirming its capture, and sparks fly off and then the Pokeball shrinks, unable to be opened. Ash then picks up Audino's Pokeball and puts it in his pack for safekeeping, and the group continues on to Striaton City. With a Blitzel and Audino added to his roster of Pokemon, Ash and friends now prepare to enter Striaton City to meet up with Ash's old friend Cillian. Stay tuned to see what happens.
Hey guys, if you like this video, please do one thing, like it. Share it with your those friends who love to watch Pokemon or any fanfic of anime which are related to specific genres. So please do that and turn on the bell icon for notification of these any other series which are still ongoing on channel. Thanks for watching.